Amora had always believed that survival was enough. That waking up each morning, breathing through the weight pressing against her chest, feeding her daughter with borrowed money and borrowed time, that this was living. She never asked for more. She never dared to. The cafe was almost empty that night. Just her, a cup of coffee gone cold, and the hum of a city that never stopped moving. She sat by the window, fingers tracing the rim of the chipped porcelain, eyes unfocused on the blurred headlights outside. She had come here to think, to escape the silence of her apartment where every creak of the floorboards reminded her of bills she couldn't pay, promises she couldn't keep, and a little girl who still believed her mother could fix everything. She couldn't. Amora's hands trembled as she opened her phone. 17 missed calls, all from the same number. She didn't need to answer to know what they wanted. Money. Always money. The kind that came with interest rates that doubled every week. The kind that turned whispers into threats, threats into visits in the dark. She had borrowed to save her daughter's life. A surgery. A chance. And now that chance was choking her. The door chimed. She didn't look up. Footsteps moved across the tiled floor, slow and deliberate, the sound of expensive leather against cheap linoleum. They stopped near her table. She felt the presence before she saw him, a shadow that seemed to pull the light from the room. Before we go on, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Amora lifted her gaze. He stood there, tall and still, dressed in a suit that cost more than her yearly rent. His face was carved from something darker than stone, sharp jaw, cold eyes, a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. But it was his silence that unnerved her. He didn't ask to sit. He simply did. She opened her mouth to speak, to ask who he was, but the words died in her throat. There was something in the way he looked at her, not with curiosity, but recognition, as if he had been searching for her long before tonight. Amora, he said. Her name in his mouth felt like a sentence. Who are you? Someone who knows you owe people you shouldn't. Her blood went cold. He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin, eyes never leaving hers. And I know what happens when people like you can't pay. I'll pay, she whispered. I just need more time. Time isn't something they are offering. Then what do you want? He tilted his head, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, something almost human, almost kind. I want to help you. She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. No one helps for free. You're right. He reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the table. Thick, heavy, the kind of weight that could erase debts and rewrite futures. She stared at it, heart pounding, mind racing. What do I have to do? His eyes darkened. Tonight, you're my wife. The world tilted. She blinked, waiting for the punchline, the clarification, the moment this became something she could understand. It didn't come. What? There's an event. I need someone beside me. Someone who looks the part. Someone who won't ask questions. His voice was calm, measured, as if he were negotiating a business deal. You do this, and your debt disappears. All of it. Amora's mind screamed at her to run. To leave the envelope, the cafe, the city if she had to. But her body stayed frozen, anchored by the weight of everything she owed, everything she couldn't lose. And after tonight, you go back to your life. I go back to mine. It sounded simple. Too simple. But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem reasonable. She reached for the envelope. Her fingers brushed the paper, and she felt the shift, the moment her old life ended and something darker began. Okay. He stood, buttoning his jacket with the precision of a man who controlled everything around him. A car will pick you up in an hour. Wear something elegant. And Amora, he paused at the door, his silhouette framed by the neon glow of the street. Don't try to run. You won't make it far. Then he was gone, and she was left sitting at a table alone, holding an envelope full of blood money, wondering if she had just sold her soul or saved it. The hour passed like a fever dream. Amora stood in her tiny bathroom, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. She had pulled out the only dress she owned that could pass for elegant, a black number she'd worn to a wedding years ago, back when her life still had room for celebrations. It hung loose now. She had lost weight, lost a lot of things. Her daughter was asleep in the next room. 5 years old. Too young to know how close they had come to losing everything. Too young to know her mother was about to step into a world she didn't understand. The knock came exactly on time. She kissed her daughter's forehead, whispered a promise she wasn't sure she could keep, and opened the door. The driver didn't speak. He simply held the car door open, eyes forward, face blank. She slid into the back seat, and the door closed with a finality that made her stomach twist. The city blurred past the tinted windows. Lights. Noise. Life moving too fast to notice one woman disappearing into the night. They arrived at a place she had only seen in magazines. A sprawling estate behind iron gates, marble steps leading to doors that looked like they belonged to a palace. Men in suits lined the entrance, their eyes sharp, their hands resting near concealed weapons. She stepped out of the car, legs shaking, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He was waiting at the top of the steps, the man from the cafe. But now, in this place, he looked different, more powerful, more dangerous. The kind of man who didn't ask for things, he took them. He descended the steps, and when he reached her, he offered his arm. She hesitated, then slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow. His body was warm, solid, unyielding. "Remember," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Tonight, you're mine." And as they walked through those doors together, Amara realized she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. Inside, the world was gold and glass and whispered power. Chandeliers hung like frozen stars. Men in tailored suits spoke in languages she didn't recognize. Women draped in diamonds moved like predators in silk. And at the center of it all was him. His name, she learned, was Dante. Dante Marcello. A name that made people look away. A name that made rooms go quiet. He kept her close, his hand resting at the small of her back, guiding her through conversations she didn't understand, introductions she would never remember. She played her part, smiled when expected, stayed silent when necessary, and all the while, she felt the weight of eyes on her, assessing, questioning, wondering who she was and why Dante Marcello had chosen her. But the strangest part was the way he looked at her. Not like a prop, not like a tool, like something fragile he was afraid to break. Hours passed. The night stretched long and heavy. And then, as the crowd began to thin, he leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "You did well." She didn't respond, didn't trust herself to speak. He led her outside, away from the lights and the noise, to a terrace overlooking the city. The air was cool, the sky bruised with the first hints of dawn. "Why me?" she finally asked. He was silent for a long time. Then, without looking at her, he said, "Because you looked like someone who understood loss." And in that moment, Amara realized something terrifying. She wasn't the only one playing a part tonight. The car ride back was different. Quieter, heavier. Dante sat beside her, his gaze fixed on the window, his face unreadable. Amara kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers knotted together, trying to keep herself from falling apart. She had done it, survived the night, played the role, and now, supposedly, she was free. But freedom felt like a word she no longer understood. The car stopped outside her building. The driver opened the door, and she stepped out into the gray light of early morning. The city was waking up, vendors setting up stalls, buses rumbling past, the smell of bread and exhaust mingling in the air. She turned to say something. Thank you, goodbye, anything, but Dante was already looking at her, and the expression on his face stopped her cold. "This isn't over," he said. Her heart sank. "You said one night." "I did." "Then what?" "They know about you now." The words landed like a blow. She took a step back, shaking her head. "What are you talking about?" "The people you owe. The people I just made very uncomfortable by bringing you into my world. His voice was calm, clinical, like he was explaining a simple fact. They'll come for you, and they won't be kind. Panic clawed at her chest. You said you'd handle it. You said. I said I'd erase your debt. I did, but I didn't account for how quickly word would spread. He stepped closer, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or something darker. You're not safe anymore, Amora. Then what am I supposed to do? Come with me. She laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. You're insane. Probably. I have a daughter, a life. I can't just. Your daughter will be safer with you under my protection than alone in this city. His tone shifted, hardened. You have two choices. Come with me, or take your chances with the men who are already watching this building. She followed his gaze. Across the street, half hidden in shadow, a man stood smoking a cigarette. He wasn't looking at her. He didn't have to. She could feel his presence like a weight pressing against her spine. Her breath came shallow and fast. This is your fault. Yes. You used me. Yes. And now I'm supposed to trust you. Dante's jaw tightened. No, but you're supposed to survive. And right now, I'm the only reason you will. She wanted to scream, to run, to wake up and find this was all some terrible nightmare. But the man across the street flicked his cigarette to the ground and started walking toward them. Dante's hand closed around her wrist. Decide, now. Her mind raced. Her daughter, her life, everything she had fought to protect, and the cold, undeniable truth that she had no other choice. Okay. He nodded once, then guided her back into the car. The door shut, and they were moving again, leaving her building, her neighborhood, her last shred of normalcy behind. Where are we going? Somewhere they won't follow. And my daughter? Already being moved. She'll be safe. Amora's head snapped toward him. You went to my apartment. I sent people I trust. You had no right. I had every right the moment you agreed to step into my world. His voice was hard, unyielding. You think this is a game? You think those men would have stopped at you? They would have taken her, Amora, used her to make you pay in ways you can't imagine. Her hands shook. Tears baned at the edges of her vision, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. I hate you. Good. Hate keeps you sharp. The rest of the drive passed in silence. They arrived at a place that didn't exist on any map. A compound hidden in the hills outside the city, surrounded by walls and guards and the kind of security that made her stomach turn. Inside, everything was cold and pristine. Marble floors, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a world she no longer belonged to. Dante led her through hallways that felt more like a museum than a home. Servants moved like ghosts, eyes downcast, voices non-existent. He stopped at a door and pushed it open. This is your room. It was larger than her entire apartment, a bed that could fit 4 people, a balcony, a bathroom with fixtures that looked like they belonged in a palace. And my daughter? Next door. Relief flooded through her, sharp and overwhelming. I want to see her. She's asleep. You can see her when she wakes. Amora turned to him, anger flaring. You don't get to tell me when I can see my own child. Dante stepped closer, and the air between them crackled with something dangerous. I just saved both your lives. You'll follow my rules, or you'll find yourself back on that street corner with nowhere left to run. They stared at each other, locked in a silent battle neither would win. Finally, he stepped back. Get some rest. We'll talk later. He left, and the door closed behind him with a soft click. Amora sank onto the bed, head in her hands, and let the tears come. Days blurred together. She saw her daughter, Lila, every morning and every night. The little girl adapted faster than Amora did, treating the compound like an adventure, the guards like friendly giants. She didn't understand the danger, didn't know they were prisoners in a gilded cage. Dante was everywhere and nowhere. She would catch glimpses of him, speaking in low tones with men who looked like they could kill without flinching, disappearing into rooms she wasn't allowed to enter, watching her from across the courtyard with an expression she couldn't read. He never touched her, never demanded anything, but his presence was constant, oppressive, a reminder that she existed at his mercy. And slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to resist, she began to notice things. The way he always checked on Lila before leaving in the morning. The way he made sure Amara's meals included food she liked, even though she never told anyone her preferences. The way he stood between her and the world, a wall of violence and control, keeping everything at bay. If this story has already found a place in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more stories that stay long after they end. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the halls. The compound was quiet, lit only by soft ambient lights. She found herself in a library, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, the smell of old paper and bourbon. And Dante, sitting in the dark, a glass in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered. "Can't sleep?" "No, neither can I." She stood in the doorway, uncertain. "Why are you doing this?" "Protecting you." "Using me, then protecting me, then keeping me here like—" She stopped, searching for the word. "Like a prisoner." He finally looked at her, and she saw something raw in his eyes. "Because the alternative is watching you die. You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What does that mean?" He took a slow sip of his drink, then set the glass down. "It means I've seen what happens to people who get caught in the crossfire, and I'm tired of it." Amora stepped closer, drawn by something she didn't understand. "What happened to you?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear, he said, "I lost someone. Someone I should have protected, and I swore I'd never let it happen again." The vulnerability in his voice cracked something open inside her. She wanted to stay angry, to keep him at a distance. But in that moment, he wasn't the man who had taken her life and twisted it. He was just someone who had lost too much and was trying, in his broken way, to keep from losing more. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He looked away. "Don't be. Just stay alive." And for the first time since this nightmare began, Amara wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the only one trapped. Time moved differently in the compound. Days folded into each other like pages in a book she couldn't stop reading. Amara tried to find routines, waking with Lila, walking the gardens, avoiding the parts of the estate where Dante conducted business she didn't want to understand. But the routines felt like lies. Comfortable lies, maybe, but lies nonetheless. She was still a prisoner, just one with silk sheets and 3 meals a day. Lila, though, was thriving. The little girl had taken to the space with the boundless adaptability of childhood. She played in the gardens, chased butterflies, charmed the guards with her laughter. One of them, a man named Marco with a scar across his cheek and a surprisingly gentle smile, had even started teaching her to draw. Amora watched from the terrace one afternoon as Lila sat cross-legged on the grass, Marco beside her, both of them hunched over a sketchpad. The sight should have brought her peace. Instead, it filled her with a gnawing anxiety. This wasn't their life. This was borrowed, stolen, and eventually, it would have to be returned. "She's happy." Amora turned. Dante stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching the same scene. "For now. That's all any of us get. Moments." She studied him. He looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying weight no one else could see. His suit was still perfect, his posture still commanding, but there was a heaviness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "This life. The choices you've made." He was quiet for a long time. Then, Without looking at her, he said, "Every day." The honesty startled her. She had expected deflection, arrogance, maybe even anger. Not this quiet confession. Then why not leave? He finally turned to her, and the look in his eyes was something close to pity. "Because leaving doesn't erase what you've done. It just makes you a coward. So you stay. I stay. And you bring people like me into it." His jaw tightened. "I didn't bring you into this. You were already drowning. I just pulled you into a different ocean. That doesn't make you a hero." "I never said it did." They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken things pressing between them. Finally, Dante turned to leave. "Wait." He paused. "Why do you check on her?" Amora asked. "Lila. Every morning. I've noticed." His shoulders tensed. "Because children shouldn't suffer for the sins of adults." And then he was gone, leaving her alone on the terrace, heart aching with a confusion she didn't want to name. That night, Amora couldn't sleep. Again, she wandered the halls, drawn by some invisible thread to the library. It had become a strange ritual, finding Dante there in the dark, both of them too restless to rest. He was in the same chair, same glass of bourbon, same haunted expression. "You're going to wear a path in the floor," he said without looking up. "Maybe I like walking. Or maybe you like avoiding your thoughts." She sat in the chair across from him, says the man drinking alone in the dark. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Touché." They sat in companionable silence. Outside, the night was still, the world held at bay by walls and men with guns. Inside, the air felt almost peaceful. "Tell me about her," Amora said. "Who?" "The person you lost." Dante's hand tightened around his glass. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "Her name was Sophia, my sister." His voice was low, distant, like he was reaching back through years of pain. "She was younger than me, smarter, kinder, everything I wasn't." Amora listened, heart aching. She wanted out, wanted a normal life, away from all this. "I told her I'd protect her, told her she could leave, and I'd make sure no one touched her." He took a long drink. "I was wrong." "What happened?" "They used her to get to me, took her, hurt her, and by the time I found her, it was too late." The weight of his grief filled the room. Amora felt tears prick her eyes, not for herself, but for him. For the boy who had promised to protect his sister and failed. "It wasn't your fault, wasn't it?" He looked at her then, and the rawness in his gaze was almost unbearable. "I brought her into this world. I kept her close because I thought I could control everything. And she paid the price. So now you keep me close for the same reason." "No." His voice was firm, unyielding. "Now I keep you close because I know what happens when I don't. If you've ever felt torn between fear and love, you'll understand her. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Your support keeps stories like this alive." Amora's chest tightened. She wanted to be angry, wanted to push back against the control, the cage, the way he had rewritten her life without permission. But sitting there, watching the grief play out across his face, she couldn't summon the rage. "I'm not your sister," she said softly. "I know." "Then stop trying to save her through me." His eyes met hers, and something shifted. "Maybe I'm just trying to save you." The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Amora's heart pounded. She should leave. Should go back to her room, lock the door, build the walls higher. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed. And they sat in the dark together, two people bound by circumstances neither had chosen, finding something like understanding in the silence. The days that followed were different. Softer. Dante began joining them for meals. Not every day, but enough that Lila started asking for him when he wasn't there. He taught the little girl card games, listened to her endless stories, And once, when Lila fell asleep on the couch, he carried her to bed with a gentleness that broke something inside Amora. She watched him with her daughter and saw a man who was trying, in his broken way, to be something other than what the world had made him. And against every warning screaming in her mind, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. One afternoon, she found him in the courtyard, shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat on his brow, sparring with one of his men. The fight was brutal, efficient, a reminder of the violence that lived beneath his skin. But when he saw her watching, he stopped. "Didn't know I had an audience," he said, breathing hard. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You're not." He grabbed a towel, wiping his face, and for a moment they just looked at each other. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things neither dared to say. "Can I ask you something?" Amora said, "Always." "Do you ever wish you could be someone else?" Dante considered the question. "Every day, but wishing doesn't change what you are." "What are you?" He stepped closer, and she could see the scars on his knuckles, the faint marks on his neck, the history of violence written into his skin. A man trying not to be a monster. "And what am I?" His gaze softened. "Someone who deserves better than this." "Then let me go." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear, he said, "I can't." "Why?" "Because if I do, you'll die, and I can't lose anyone else." The confession hit her like a punch. She saw it then, the truth he'd been hiding. This wasn't about control. It wasn't about possession. It was about fear. He was terrified of losing her. And God help her, she was starting to be terrified of losing him too. There was a rhythm to captivity. Amora learned the way prisoners learn the routines of their cells, the way sunlight moved across the courtyard, the way footsteps echoed in the halls at certain hours, the way Dante's silences spoke louder than his words. She wasn't allowed to leave. That much was clear. But the cage was large enough that she could almost pretend she had chosen to stay. Almost. Lila helped. The little girl filled the days with laughter and questions and the kind of innocent joy that made it easy to forget, for moments at a time, that they were living in the compound of a man who built his empire on blood and fear. But at night, when Lila was asleep and the compound grew quiet, Amara couldn't forget. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the city beyond the walls. She thought about her old life, the cramped apartment, the unpaid bills, the constant fear of not having enough. She had been drowning then, but at least she had been free. Now, she had safety, comfort, everything she needed, except the one thing that mattered most: choice. And yet, when she thought about leaving, truly leaving, taking Lila and disappearing into the world again, something held her back. Fear, maybe, or something worse. Something that felt dangerously like attachment. Dante kept his distance. Mostly, he would appear at meals, at odd hours, always watching, always present. But he didn't push, didn't demand. He moved through the compound like a ghost, there and not there, a shadow she couldn't quite escape. But there were moments when their eyes would meet across a room and the air would shift. Moments when his hand would brush hers as he passed, and the touch would linger longer than necessary. Moments when she would catch him watching her, and the look in his eyes would be something raw and unguarded, something that made her heart race and her breath catch. She told herself it didn't mean anything. He told himself the same. They were both lying. One evening, a storm rolled in, the kind that turned the sky black and the air electric. Rain hammered against the windows, and thunder shook the walls. Lila was afraid, clinging to Amara, and no amount of soothing could calm her. Dante appeared in the doorway. "She okay?" Amara nodded, though Lila's grip on her arm was tight enough to hurt. "She doesn't like storms." He stepped inside, crouching down so he was eye level with the little girl. "You know what I do when I'm scared." Lila peeked at him through tear-streaked eyes. "What?" "I remind myself that storms always pass." They are loud and scary, but they don't last forever. Promise. Promise. He stayed with them, sat on the floor, back against the bed, telling Lila stories about nothing and everything until her breathing evened out and she fell asleep curled against Amora's side. Amora looked down at him, this man who had taken her life and twisted it, who kept her caged and safe in equal measure, and felt something shift inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "She's a good kid." "She is." "You're a good mother." The words hit her harder than they should have. She had spent so long doubting herself, wondering if she was enough, if she could give Lila the life she deserved. Hearing it from him, this man who saw the worst of the world every day, felt like absolution. "I'm trying." That's all anyone can do. They sat in silence, the storm raging outside, the room warm and still. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Amara felt something close to peace. The next morning, she woke to find Dante gone. Marco told her he had left before dawn for business in the city. He didn't say when he would be back. Amora tried not to think about it, tried not to wonder where he was, what he was doing, if he was safe. But the worry gnawed at her, and when the sun set and he still hadn't returned, the worry turned into something sharper. She found herself in the library, pacing, unable to sit still. The compound felt too quiet without him, too empty. It was past midnight when she heard the door open. He walked in, suit jacket gone, shirt stained with something dark, face pale and drawn. He looked like he had been through a war. "Jesus, what happened?" "Nothing." "That's not nothing." She crossed the room, reaching for him, but he stepped back. "Don't." "You're hurt." "I said don't." His voice was sharp, final. But she saw the way his hands shook, the way his jaw clenched, the way he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. "Sit down," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. He looked like he wanted to fight her, but exhaustion won. He sank into the chair, head in his hands. Amora found the first aid kit. She had learned where everything was kept over the past weeks, and knelt in front of him. She unbuttoned his shirt carefully, revealing bruises and cuts, the evidence of violence she didn't want to imagine. "This is going to sting," she warned. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just sat there, silent and still, as she cleaned the wounds. If your heart's racing too, take a breath, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." "Then why?" She paused, hands stilling on his skin. "Because you've been taking care of me, and someone needs to take care of you." His eyes met hers, and the vulnerability in them nearly broke her. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not, but I'm doing it anyway." She finished bandaging the worst of the cuts, then sat back on her heels. They stayed like that, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. "What happened out there?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Dante." "I handled it." "At what cost?" He looked away. "The only cost that matters. I kept you safe." The words landed like a stone in her chest. She wanted to be angry, wanted to tell him she didn't need him to sacrifice himself for her. But the truth was more complicated. She was starting to need him, and that terrified her more than anything. The days blurred together again, but something had changed. The walls between them were thinner now, more fragile. They spent more time together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She would find him in the mornings, and they would have coffee in silence. He would join her and Lila in the gardens, and the little girl would climb into his lap like he was family. And at night, they would end up in the library, talking about everything and nothing, the darkness making it easier to be honest. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked one night. "Every day." "But you don't." "No. Why?" He turned to her, and the look in his eyes was something fierce and fragile. Because if I leave, everything I've built falls apart, and the people I've kept safe become targets. Including me. Especially you. The weight of his words settled over her. She understood then, truly understood, that she wasn't just trapped by circumstance. She was trapped by him, by the choices he had made, the life he had built, the enemies he had created. And yet, when she looked at him, she didn't see a captor. She saw a man trying, in his broken way, to be something better than what the world demanded. I don't know how to feel about you, she admitted. He smiled, sad and knowing. Join the club. Do you ever feel guilty for keeping me here? Every second of every day. Then why not let me go? He reached out, his hand hovering near hers, not quite touching. Because the world out there would destroy you, and I can't watch that happen. So you destroy me in here instead. His hand dropped. Maybe. They sat in silence, the truth hanging between them, heavy and undeniable. And Amora realized something that made her heart ache. She didn't want to leave anymore. Not because she was afraid of what waited outside, but because she was afraid of what she would lose if she left him behind. The compound had become a world unto itself. Days folded into nights, and nights into mornings, and Amora stopped counting how long she had been there. Time lost meaning when every day was the same, safe, controlled, suffocating. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. She felt it in the way Dante looked at her, in the way his silences grew heavier, his absences longer, in the way he would stand at the edge of the courtyard, watching her and Lila, something unreadable in his eyes. He was pulling away, and she hated how much it hurt. It started small. He stopped joining them for meals, stopped appearing in the library at night. When she did see him, he was distant, guarded, the walls he had let down slowly rebuilding themselves brick by brick. Amora told herself it didn't matter, that she should be relieved. That distance was safer, smarter, the only thing that made sense in this impossible situation. But relief didn't come. Only a hollow ache that grew with each passing day. Lila noticed too. "Where's Dante?" she asked one morning, her small face scrunched with concern. "He's busy, sweetheart. But he promised to show me the koi pond today." Amora's heart twisted. I'm sure he didn't forget. He's just working. But when Dante finally appeared that evening, late and exhausted, Lila ran to him with the kind of trust that made Amora's throat tight. "You promised," the little girl said, not accusatory, just hopeful. Something flickered across Dante's face. Guilt, pain, something softer. He crouched down, meeting Lila's eyes. "You're right. I did. Come on." He took her hand, and they disappeared into the gardens together. Amora watched from the terrace, arms wrapped around herself, trying to ignore the way her chest ached. That night, after Lila was asleep, Amora went looking for him. She found him in his office, a room she had never entered, a space that felt like the heart of his empire. The door was open, and he sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "You shouldn't be in here." "Why?" "Because this is the part of my life you don't need to see." She stepped closer, ignoring the warning in his voice. "I've been living in your world for weeks, Dante. I think I've seen enough." "Not this." "Then show me." He stood, and the movement was sharp, almost offensive. "Why?" "So you can understand what kind of man you're living with. So you can see the blood on my hands more clearly." "Maybe I just want to understand you." "There's nothing to understand. I'm exactly what you think I am." "No," she said, her voice steady. "You're not." He stared at her, jaw tight, something fierce and vulnerable warring in his eyes. "You don't know me, Amora." "Then let me." The silence stretched between them, taut and electric. She could see the war playing out on his face, the instinct to push her away, to keep her safe from the darkest parts of himself, battling against something deeper, something that wanted to be known. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raw. "I killed a man tonight." The words landed like stones. Amora's breath caught, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. "He was going to hurt someone under my protection," Dante continued, his gaze never leaving hers. "And I didn't hesitate. I never do." "Was it necessary? Does it matter?" "Yes." He looked away, his hands braced against the desk. He would have kept coming, would have hurt more people. So I ended it. That's what I do, Amora. I end things. And you think that makes you a monster, doesn't it? She crossed the distance between them, her heart pounding. "I think it makes you someone who's been forced to make impossible choices. I think it makes you human." "You're wrong." "Am I?" She reached out, her hand hovering near his. "Because the man I've been living with for the past month, the man who checks on my daughter every morning, who sits with her during storms, who looks at me like I'm something precious, that man doesn't feel like a monster." Dante's eyes met hers, and the rawness in them nearly broke her. "That man is the lie I tell myself so I can sleep at night. Or maybe he's the truth you're too afraid to believe." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, his hand came up, his fingers brushing her cheek with a gentleness that stole her breath. "You should hate me," he whispered. "I know. You should leave. I know. But you're still here. I know." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and she felt herself leaning into the touch, her body betraying every rational thought screaming at her to walk away. "Amora." "Don't," she said softly. "Don't push me away again. Not tonight." He looked at her for a long moment, something breaking behind his eyes. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. And she held him back. Two people who shouldn't fit, who shouldn't like, finding something like home in each other's brokenness. They didn't speak after that, just stood there in the quiet of his office, the city lights glittering beyond the windows, the world held at bay by walls and silence. When Amora finally pulled back, she saw something different in his eyes. Not distance, not walls. Hope. Fragile and terrifying, but there. "I don't know what this is," she admitted. "Neither do I. But I don't want to lose it." His hand tightened on hers. "You won't. I promise." And for the first time since he had taken her into his world, she believed him. The next morning, everything felt different. Lighter. Dante joined them for breakfast, and Lila chatted away about the koi pond, and Amara found herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in weeks. But the peace didn't last. It never did. Marco found Dante mid-morning, his expression grim. They spoke in low tones near the entrance, and Amara watched from the courtyard, her stomach sinking. Something was wrong. When Dante came to find her, his face was carved from stone. "We need to talk." "What happened?" "Someone found you." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "The people you owed. They know you're here, and they are coming." Before we close this chapter, take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below. Every small gesture helps the next story find its way to you. Panic clawed at her chest. "How? Does it matter?" His voice was hard, controlled. "What matters is keeping you safe." "And Lila?" "She's already being moved to the safest part of the compound. You need to stay inside. Don't go near the windows. Don't leave your room unless I tell you." "Dante." "No arguments, Amora. Not now." She wanted to fight him, wanted to demand answers, control, something. But the look in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't the man who had held her last night. This was the man who had built an empire on violence and fear. This was the man who would do anything to protect what was his. And God help her She trusted him. Okay. He nodded once, then turned to leave. Dante. He paused. Be careful. His eyes softened, just for a moment. Always. Then he was gone, and Amara was left standing in the courtyard, heart pounding, knowing that the fragile peace they had built was about to shatter. The hours that followed were torture. Amara stayed in her room, Lila beside her, trying to keep the little girl calm while her own mind raced with worst-case scenarios. She could hear movement in the compound, footsteps, voices, the distant sound of engines. The guards were mobilizing, preparing for something she couldn't see. And Dante was at the center of it all. She thought about the man she had held last night, the vulnerability in his eyes, the way he had clung to her like she was the only thing keeping him human. She thought about losing him, and the fear that gripped her was unlike anything she had ever felt. Not the fear of a captive for her captor, but the fear of a woman who had fallen for a man she was never supposed to love. Night fell. The compound grew quiet. Too quiet. Amara put Lila to bed, kissed her forehead, and stepped into the hallway. She knew she shouldn't leave. Knew Dante had told her to stay put, but she couldn't sit still. Couldn't wait in the dark, not knowing. She made her way through the halls, moving silently, until she reached the main entrance. And there, standing in the shadows, was Dante. He looked different, harder. The man she had seen in the office, the one who killed without hesitation, was fully present now. I told you to stay in your room, he said without turning. I couldn't. You're putting yourself in danger. So are you. He finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. This is what I do, Amara. This is who I am. I know. And you're still here. I'm still here. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then, slowly, he crossed the distance between them, his hand cupping her face. If something happens to me, don't. Listen. His voice was firm, steady. If something happens, Marco will take care of you and Lila. He knows where to take you. You'll be safe. I don't want safe without you. The confession hung between them, raw and undeniable. Dante's eyes closed, and when he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like pain. You shouldn't have fallen for me. Too late. He kissed her then, soft and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her, the taste of her, the way she fit against him. And when he pulled back, he whispered, I'll come back. I promise. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night, leaving her standing alone in the shadows, heart pounding, knowing that everything was about to change. The weight was unbearable. Amara returned to her room, but sleep was impossible. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tight, listening to every sound, every footstep, every distant echo that might mean he was back, might mean he was safe. Hours passed. The compound remained silent. No alarms, no gunfire, just the oppressive quiet of a world holding its breath. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. Amora hadn't moved, hadn't rested. Her body ached with tension, her mind spinning through every terrible possibility. And then she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, heavy, uneven. Her heart leaped into her throat. The door opened, and Dante stepped inside. He was alive, battered, bruised, his shirt torn and stained with blood, but alive. Amara was across the room before she could think, her hands reaching for him, her eyes scanning every inch of him for serious injury. You're hurt. I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's not mine. The word should have scared her, should have reminded her of who he was, what he did, but all she felt was relief, overwhelming and dizzying. What happened? It's over. His voice was flat, emotionless. They won't come for you again. Dante. They are dead, Amora. All of them. She froze. The weight of what he was saying settled over her like a shroud. He had killed them, ended them, erased the threat with the kind of finality that left no room for doubt. "Because of me," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "Because they threatened what's mine." The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened her, but instead, it sent a strange warmth through her chest. "You shouldn't have had to." "Yes, I should have." He stepped closer, his hands framing her face, his eyes fierce. "I told you I'd protect you. I meant it, no matter the cost." "And what about the cost to you?" "I stopped counting years ago." She saw it then, the weariness, the weight of every life he had taken, every choice that had carved pieces out of his soul. He was a man built from violence, but underneath, he was just someone trying to hold on to the few things that still mattered. "Let me take care of you," she said softly. For a moment, he looked like he would argue, but exhaustion won. He nodded, and she led him to the bathroom. She cleaned his wounds in silence, her hands steady even as her heart raced. He didn't flinch, didn't complain, just sat there, eyes closed, letting her tend to him with a trust that felt sacred. When she was done, she helped him to the bed. He collapsed onto it, and she curled up beside him, her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For coming back." His arm tightened around her. "I'll always come back, as long as you're here." And in that moment, Amora realized something that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was home. The days that followed were different. The tension that had hung over the compound lifted, replaced by something calmer. Dante was still busy. His world didn't stop spinning just because one threat had been eliminated. But he made time. For her. For Lila. For the fragile, impossible thing growing between them. They didn't talk about what they were. Didn't label it. But it was there in every glance, every touch, every moment they stole together when the world wasn't watching. Lila adored him, and he, in his quiet, guarded way, adored her back. Amara would watch them together, Dante teaching Lila to play chess, or listening to her endless stories with a patience that seemed impossible for a man like him, and her heart would ache with something she couldn't name. It felt like family, and that thought scared her more than anything. One evening, after Lila was asleep, Dante found Amara on the terrace. The city sprawled below them, a sea of lights and noise and life. He didn't say anything, just stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about this, us. What happens next?" Her heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" He turned to her, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. "I can't keep you locked up forever, Amora. That was never the plan." "Then what was the plan?" "To keep you safe until the threat was gone. And now it is." She understood what he was saying, what he was offering. Freedom. The chance to leave, to take Lila and build a life somewhere far from him, far from this world. The chance to escape. But the thought of leaving him felt like tearing out a piece of her soul. "What if I don't want to go?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He stared at her, something fierce and fragile whirring in his expression. "You should. But I don't." "Amora." "I know what you are, Dante. I know what you've done. And I'm not saying I understand all of it, or that I agree with it. But I also know what you've given me. Safety. Protection. A place where my daughter can be happy." She took a breath, steadying herself. "And something I never expected. Something I didn't think I'd ever feel again." "What?" "Hope." The word hung between them, fragile and powerful. Dante reached for her, his hands cradling her face, his forehead resting against hers. "You make me want to be better than I am." "Then be better. With me." "It won't be easy." "I know. This life, it's dangerous, complicated. There will always be threats, always be." "I know," she said again, cutting him off. But I'd rather face all of that with you than be safe and alone. For a long moment, he just held her, his breath warm against her skin. Then, quietly, he said, "I love you." The words hit her like a wave. Simple, true, terrifying. "I love you too." And when he kissed her, it felt like a promise, not of perfection, or ease, or safety, but of something real, something worth fighting for, something worth staying for. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again. They stood there together, the city glittering below, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. And for the first time in her life, Amara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because she had no other choice, but because she had chosen him, chosen this, chosen love in its strangest, most impossible form. And that made all the difference. Love, Amara learned, was not the end of complications. It was the beginning of them. Living with Dante, truly living with him, not as a captive but as something else, something undefined and fragile, meant learning the rhythms of a life built on contradictions. He was gentle with her, fierce with his enemies. He could be tender with Lila one moment and cold as winter the next when dealing with his men. He gave orders that shaped lives and ended them, then came home and asked Amara how her day had been with genuine interest in her answer. It was disorienting. It was impossible. And yet, somehow, it worked. The compound became less of a prison and more of a sanctuary. Amara had freedoms now. She could go into the city with guards, could choose how she spent her days, could make decisions about Lila's schooling and her own life. But she always came back, always chose to return to the place where Dante waited, because it wasn't the compound that held her anymore. It was him. Lila flourished. The little girl had a sense of stability she'd never known before. Her laughter filled the halls, and even the hardened men who worked for Dante couldn't help but smile when she ran past. Marco had become something like an uncle, teaching her to draw and telling her exaggerated stories that made her giggle. And Dante had become her father in all the ways that mattered. He never claimed the title, never pushed, but he was there for school projects and bedtime stories and the small moments that built a childhood. He was patient with her questions, firm but kind with discipline, and fiercely protective in a way that made Amara's heart ache. One night, Amara found him in Lila's room long after the little girl had fallen asleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, just watching her, something tender and broken on his face. "She's lucky to have you," Amara said softly from the doorway. He looked up, startled, then shook his head. "I'm the lucky one. She doesn't know what you do, what you've done." "I know. And someday, when she's old enough, I'll tell her. And she'll have to decide if she can still look at me the same way." "What if she can't?" Pain flickered across his face. "Then I'll deserve it." Amara crossed the room, sitting beside him. "You're harder on yourself than anyone else would be. Someone has to be." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You're a good man, Dante. Not perfect, not innocent, but good." He turned to her, and the look in his eyes was raw. "How can you say that, after everything you know?" "Because I see the choices you make, not just the violent ones, but the others. The way you protect people who can't protect themselves. The way you give second chances even when you shouldn't. The way you love us." She squeezed his hand. "That matters too." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Maybe not, but you have me anyway." They sat there in the quiet, Lila's soft breathing the only sound, and Amara felt a peace she had never expected to find. But peace, in Dante's world, was always temporary. It came in the form of a phone call, late at night, the kind that made his entire body go rigid. Amara woke to find him standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and hard. When he hung up, she saw the tension in every line of his body. What's wrong? Nothing you need to worry about. Dante. I have to go. There's something I need to handle. She sat up, dread pooling in her stomach. How dangerous. It's always dangerous. Then don't go. He turned to her, and the look on his face made her heart sink. I have to. If I don't, everything we've built, the safety, the peace, it falls apart. And if something happens to you, it won't. You can't promise that. He crossed the room, sitting on the edge of the bed, his hand cupping her face. I can promise I'll do everything in my power to come back. That has to be enough. She wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to stay, to choose them over whatever obligation was pulling him away. But she saw the resolve in his eyes and knew it would be useless. This was who he was, and she had chosen to love him anyway. Then promise me something else, she said. Anything. Promise you'll be smart, that you won't take unnecessary risks. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I promise. He kissed her, slow and deep, like he was mimeizing the feel of her. Then he was gone, slipping out into the night, leaving her alone with her fears and the weight of loving a man who lived on the edge of violence. The next 3 days were hell. Amora tried to maintain normalcy for Lila's sake, but the worry gnawed at her constantly. She barely ate, barely slept. Every sound made her jump, hoping it was him returning. Marco tried to reassure her. He's been through worse. He'll be fine. But the uncertainty was unbearable. On the third night, exhausted and frayed, she finally broke down. She found herself in the library, the place where they had spent so many nights talking, and let the tears come. She had been strong for so long. Strong for Lila. Strong for herself. But loving Dante meant living with a fear that never quite went away, the fear of losing him to a world that demanded everything and gave nothing back. I didn't know you were waiting up. She spun around. Dante stood in the doorway, alive and whole, looking exhausted but unharmed. Relief crashed over her so powerfully she could barely breathe. She crossed the room, throwing her arms around him, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. You're okay. I promised, didn't I? She pulled back, hitting his chest with her fist. Don't do that to me again. Don't leave without telling me when you'll be back. I couldn't. I don't care. I need to know you're coming home. Dante. I need. Her voice broke. I can't lose you. His arms tightened around her. You won't. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep it. They stood there, holding each other, and Amara felt the cracks in her armor growing. Loving him meant accepting the uncertainty, accepting that every goodbye might be the last, accepting that this life would never be simple or safe. But it also meant having something worth holding on to, and that, she decided, was enough. After that night, things shifted again. Dante was more present, more careful. He still had his responsibilities, still disappeared for hours or days at a time, but he always came back, always checked in, always made sure she knew he was thinking of her. And slowly, the rhythm of their life became something Amara could almost call normal. She started taking classes, online courses in business management, something to occupy her mind and build toward a future. Dante supported it without question, even set up an office for Ho in the compound. Lila started school, a private academy that Dante vetted thoroughly, with security that made Fort Knox look relaxed. The little girl thrived, making friends, bringing home out projects and stories about her day. And Amara and Dante, they built something that felt more solid with each passing day. Not perfect, not without conflict, but real. They argued sometimes, about his work, about the risks he took, about the way he could shut down emotionally when things got hard. But they also learned how to come back together, how to talk through the difficult things, how to let each other in. One evening, As they sat together on the terrace, Dante turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking about something." "Should I be worried?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Maybe." "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Amora's heart stopped. "I know this isn't traditional," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "And I know we've done everything backward. But I want you to know that this, what we have, it's real for me. You're real for me. And if you'll have me, I want to make it official." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant ring. "Marry me, Amora. Not because you have to, not because you're trapped, but because you want to. Because we're building something together that's worth making permanent." Tears blurred her vision. She looked at him, this complicated, dangerous, impossibly tender man, and felt the last of her defenses crumble. "Yes." The word came out as a whisper, but it felt like a shout. Dante slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And as they sat there together, the city lights glittering below, Amora realized she had found something she never thought possible. Not just love, but home. They were married on a quiet morning in the compound's garden, surrounded by roses and the people who had become their unlikely family. No grand celebration. No spectacle. Just a simple ceremony that felt more like a promise whispered in the dark than a declaration shouted to the world. Lila stood beside Amora, clutching a basket of flower petals, her face glowing with joy. Marco stood beside Dante, looking uncomfortable in a suit, but smiling nonetheless. A handful of trusted men lined the perimeter, less guests than guardians, ensuring the moment remained untouched by the outside world. The officiant was brief, the words traditional but heartfelt. And when Dante said, "I do," his voice was steady, certain, carrying the weight of every promise he had ever made and kept. Amora's voice shook when she repeated the words, not from fear, but from the overwhelming reality of what she was doing. She was binding her life to his, not because she had no choice, but because she had made one, the one that mattered most. When the officiant pronounced them married, Dante kissed her with a tenderness that made her forget, for just a moment, all the complicated truths of their life. It was just them, just this, just love in its purest, most impossible form. Lila threw petals everywhere, laughing, and even the hardened men standing guard couldn't hide their smiles. It was perfect, not because it was grand or flawless, but because it was theirs. The reception was small. Dinner in the main hall, simple food, and quiet conversation. Dante held Amora's hand under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, and she felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. Later, when the guests had dispersed and Lila was tucked into bed, Dante led Amora to the terrace. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I thought I'd ever be." He pulled her close, and they swayed to music only they could hear. "I never imagined this," he admitted. "A wife, a family, something worth protecting that wasn't built on fear or obligation." "What is it built on?" He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. "Hope. You gave me that. We gave each other that." They danced in silence, and Amora let herself feel the full weight of the moment. She had been so many things in her life: a struggling mother, a desperate woman, a captive, a survivor. But now, standing here in Dante's arms, she was something else. She was chosen, and she had chosen in return. The months that followed were the happiest of Amora's life. She and Dante built routines, small rituals that made the extraordinary feel ordinary. Morning coffee together before he left for work. Bedtime stories with Lila where all three of them would crowd onto the little girl's bed. Late-night conversations in the library where they talked about everything and nothing. But happiness, Amora was learning, didn't erase the reality of the world they lived in. Dante's work remained dangerous. There were still nights he came home bruised and blooded. Still mornings he left before dawn and didn't return until dark. Still moments when the violence of his world crashed into the sanctuary they had built. But they navigated it together. One afternoon, Amara received a call from Lila's school. The little girl had gotten into a fight, unusual for her, and needed to be picked up. Amara arrived to find Lila sitting in the principal's office, arms crossed, tear-streaked but defiant. What happened? She called Dante a bad man, Lila said, her voice small but fierce. She said her dad told her that Dante hurts people. So I pushed her. Amara's heart twisted. She crouched down, meeting Lila's eyes. Sweetheart, you can't push people, no matter what they say. But she was wrong. Dante's not bad. He's the best. Amara felt tears prick her eyes. I know, baby. I know. That evening, she told Dante what had happened. He listened in silence, his jaw tight. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For putting you both in a position where you have to defend me. She wasn't defending you because she had to, Amara said firmly. She was defending you because she loves you, because you're her family. Dante looked away, and she saw the emotion he was trying to hide. Someday, she'll be old enough to understand what I really am, what I've done. And when that day comes, we'll deal with it. Together. She took his hand. But for now, she's 5. And all she knows is that you make her feel safe and loved. That's what matters. He pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. I don't deserve either of you. Stop saying that. You're exactly what we need. And in that moment, Amara meant it with every fiber of her being. Time continued its march. Lila grew. Amara's classes turned into certifications, and she started helping Dante with the legitimate side of his business, managing investments, overseeing charitable foundations he'd quietly established. She was good at it, and having a purpose beyond survival felt like breathing after years underwater. Dante softened in ways she never expected. The hard edges remained, but they were tempered by something gentler. He laughed more, smiled more, let his guard down in the safety of their home. He wasn't perfect. Neither was she, but they were real, and that was enough. One evening, as they sat together in the library, their place, where so many important moments had unfolded, Dante turned to her with a question that caught her off guard. Do you ever regret it? Saying yes that night in the cafe. Amara thought about it, really thought about it. The fear, the loss of control. The months of captivity that had slowly transformed into something else. No, she said finally. I won't lie and say I'd choose it all over again the same way. But I don't regret where it led us. Even knowing what I am. Especially knowing what you are. She turned to face him fully. You're not just the violence, Dante. You're also the man who reads bedtime stories, who makes sure Lila's favorite cereal is always stocked, who holds me when I can't sleep. You're both, and I love both. His eyes closed, and when he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Then we're even. He kissed her, and it felt like coming home. Not every day was easy. There were still fights, still moments when the weight of their circumstances felt crushing. Amara still struggled with the knowledge of what Dante did, the blood on his hands that no amount of love could wash away. And Dante still wrestled with the guilt of what he had taken from her freedom, her choice, her innocence about the darkness that lived in the world. But they had something stronger than perfection. They had commitment, the kind that didn't crumble when things got hard, the kind that said, I see all of you, and I'm staying anyway. One night, unable to sleep, Amara found herself thinking about the woman she had been before all this. The one sitting alone in that cafe, drowning in debt and fear, believing survival was the best she could hope for. She thought about how that woman would never have imagined this life. This man. This strange, complicated happiness built on impossible foundations. And she realized something profound. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. Not because the pain was necessary, not because the trauma was justified, but because we are stronger and more resilient than we ever imagined, and sometimes it takes being broken to discover all the ways we can rebuild ourselves. Dante found her on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air. Couldn't sleep. Just thinking. He sat beside her, and they looked out at the city together. About how different my life is now. About how scared I was at night in the cafe. About how I never could have imagined. She gestured at the compound, at him, at everything. This. Regrets. No. She leaned into him. Just amazement, I guess, at how life can take you somewhere you never planned to go, and somehow it ends up being exactly where you needed to be. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, he said, I used to think I was incapable of this, of being someone worth loving, worth staying for. And now I wake up every morning beside you and think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'm not irredeemable after all. Amara turned to look at him, really look at him. This man who had taken her freedom and given her safety, who had shown her darkness and light in equal measure, who loved her with a fierceness that sometimes scared her and always anchored her. You're not, she said firmly. You're just human, complicated and flawed and trying your best, like all of us. He kissed her forehead, and they sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other in the most impossible way and somehow made it work. Peace never lasted in Dante's world. Amora had learned that lesson well. But knowing it didn't make it easier when the shadow finally fell across their carefully constructed life. It started with small things. Dante spending more time in locked meetings, guards doubling their patrols, a tension in the air that made everyone move a little faster, speak a little quieter. Amora noticed, but she didn't push. She had learned when to ask questions and when to simply be present. But when Dante came to bed one night, his face gray with exhaustion and something darker, she couldn't stay silent. Tell me what's wrong. It's nothing. Don't lie to me. Not anymore. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, there's a threat. Someone trying to move in on territory that's been stable for years, and they are not playing by the old rules. What does that mean? It means they don't care about collateral damage. They don't care who gets hurt in the crossfire. Fear coiled in her stomach. Us. He looked at her, and the pain in his eyes confirmed what she already knew. I won't let them touch you, or Lila. I swear it. But you're going after them. I have to. And if something happens to you, it won't. Dante. I said it won't. His voice was hard, final. But underneath, she heard the fear he was trying to hide. She crossed the room, kneeling in front of him, taking his hands in hers. Then promise me something. Promise me you'll come back. That you won't do anything stupid or heroic or... I promise I'll do whatever it takes to come back to you. It wasn't the promise she wanted, but it was the only one he could give. The next few days were tense. Dante was gone more than he was home, and when he was there, he was distracted, always listening for the phone to ring, always ready to move at a moment's notice. Amara tried to maintain normalcy for Lila's sake, but the little girl was perceptive, picking up on the undercurrents of fear and tension. Is Dante okay? She asked one night at bedtime. Amara forced a smile. He's just busy with work, sweetheart. But he's coming back, right? Of course he is. Promise. Amara's throat tightened. I promise. She hoped it wasn't a lie. The call came in the middle of the night. Amara woke to find Dante already dressed, his face set in hard lines, his movements quick and efficient. What's happening? They made their move. I have to go. Now. Now. She scrambled out of bed, her heart racing. How bad? Bad enough. He crossed to her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Listen to me. Marco is going to stay here with you and Lila. If anything happens, anything at all, you do what he says. Understand? Dante. Understand? Yes. He kissed her, hard and desperate, then pulled back. I love you. Remember that. Don't say it like that. Don't say it like goodbye. I'm not. I'm saying it like a promise. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night, and Amara was left standing alone in their bedroom, fear clawing at her chest. The hours that followed were the longest of her life. Marco stationed himself in the main hallway, armed and alert. The compound was locked down tight, every entrance guarded, every window monitored. Amora couldn't sit still. She paced, checked on Lila a dozen times, made coffee she didn't drink, tried to read and couldn't focus on a single word, and waited. Dawn came, then mid-morning, then afternoon. Still no word. Why hasn't he called? Amara finally asked Marco, her voice shaking. He's busy, that's all. Or his height, or worse. Marco's expression softened. Dante survived worse than this. He'll be fine. But the reassurance rang hollow. It was late afternoon when they heard it. The sound of vehicles approaching fast. Too fast. Marco's hand went to his weapon. Get Lila. Go to the safe room. Now. What's happening? Now, Amora. She ran. Found Lila in her room playing with dolls, scooped her up without explanation, and carried her to the hidden room Dante had shown her months ago, a reinforced space with supplies and communication equipment designed for exactly this kind of emergency. She locked them inside, Lila's eyes wide with confusion and fear. Mama, what's wrong? Nothing, baby. We're just playing a game. I don't like this game. I know. But we have to stay quiet, okay? Really quiet. Outside, she heard voices, footsteps, the sound of doors opening and closing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. And then she heard it, Dante's voice, rough and exhausted, but unmistakably his. Where are they? Safe room, Marco responded. Relief crashed over her so powerfully she could barely breathe. She fumbled with the lock, threw open the door, and there he was, alive, bruised and blooded, his shirt torn, a cut across his cheek, but alive. Dante. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm okay. It's over. We're safe. Lila launched herself at him, wrapping her small arms around his legs. You came back. He knelt down, gathering her close. Always, little one, always. If your heart's racing too, take a breath, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below for more unforgettable love stories. Amora watched them, tears streaming down her face, and felt something shift inside her. This was her family, broken and complicated and built on foundations that would never be simple, but real. So incredibly real, and worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Later, after Lila was asleep and the compound had settled into uneasy calm, Amara tended to Dante's wounds in the bathroom. Her hands were steadier now, practiced from too many nights like this. Tell me, she said. It's done. They won't be a threat anymore. At what cost? He was quiet for a long moment. The usual one. She understood. More blood, more death, more pieces of his soul chipped away. I'm sorry you have to live like this, he said finally. I chose this. I chose you. That doesn't make it fair. She cupped his face, making him look at her. Fair or not, it's mine. We're mine. And I'm not going anywhere. His eyes closed, and she saw the weight he carried, the guilt and the grief and the exhaustion of being who he was. I used to think love was weakness, he said quietly, something that made you vulnerable, gave your enemies leverage. But you You make me stronger. Give me something worth fighting for that isn't just power or control. Then keep fighting. For us. For this. I will. I promise. And when he kissed her, it tasted like blood and salt and promises kept in the darkness. The days that followed were quieter. The immediate threat was gone, and though there would always be others, for now they had peace. Dante took time off, something his men looked at with shock. He spent days with Amara and Lila, teaching the little girl to swim in the compound's pool, having long lunches in the garden, being present in a way he rarely allowed himself. And at night, he held Amara close, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in the silence, grateful for every moment they had stolen from a world that wanted to tear them apart. One evening, as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset, Dante turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What would you think about leaving? Amora's heart stuttered. Leaving? Not forever. Just taking a trip. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere we can just be a family without all this. He gestured at the compound, the city, the life they'd built, even for a few weeks. You'd do that? For you? For Lila? Yes. Amora felt tears prick her eyes. She knew what it cost him to even suggest it. To step away from the control, the protection, the constant vigilance that kept them safe. Where would we go? A small smile tugged at his lips. Anywhere you want. She thought about it, about waking up somewhere beautiful and ordinary, where Dante was just a man and she was just a woman and Lila was just a little girl, and none of the darkness could touch them. The ocean, she said finally. Somewhere quiet. Just us. Then that's where we'll go. And as they sat there together, planning their escape from the world they'd built, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not just safety, not just love, but joy. Pure, uncomplicated, shining joy. They left on a Wednesday morning, when the compound was still quiet and the city hadn't fully woken. No grand announcement. No fanfare. Just 3 people slipping away like ghosts, leaving the weight of their lives behind. Marco drove them to a private airfield. Dante had arranged everything with the kind of meticulous planning that was second nature to him. False names, untraceable routes, a destination known only to a trusted few. Lila was excited, bouncing in her seat, asking endless questions about airplanes and oceans and adventures. Amara held Dante's hand in the back seat, watching the city disappear behind them, feeling something like wings unfurling in her chest. Freedom, not from him, but with him. The villa was everything Amara had dreamed of without knowing she was dreaming. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean, white walls and blue shutters, gardens cascading down to a private beach. Far from civilization. Far from eyes and threats and the constant hum of danger. Lila ran through the rooms, claiming the one with the balcony overlooking the sea, her laughter echoing off the walls. Dante and Amara stood in the main room, looking out at the endless blue, and she felt his arm come around her waist. It's perfect, she whispered. It's ours, for as long as we want it. She leaned into him, and for the first time in months, she felt her body relax completely. No guards, no locked doors, no shadows lurking at the edges, just peace. The days that followed were a revelation. They fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, waking with the sun, breakfast on the terrace, long days on the beach where Lila built sandcastles and chased waves. Dante, stripped of his suits and his armor, looked younger, lighter. He wore linen shirts rolled to his elbows and went barefoot, and when he smiled, it reached his eyes. Amara watched him teach Lila to skip stones, watched him lie in the sand while the little girl buried his legs, watched him be just a man instead of everything else the world demanded of him. And she fell in love with him all over again. One afternoon, while Lila napped, Amara and Dante walked along the beach, waves lapping at their feet, the sun warm on their skin. "Thank you for this," Amara said. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. I know what it cost you to leave, to let go, even temporarily. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I spent so many years believing control was the only thing keeping me alive, that if I loosened my grip for even a second, everything would fall apart. And now I realize some things are worth the risk. He stopped, turning to face her. You, Lila, it's worth more than any empire I could build. She reached up, touching his face. You're different, hey? How? Softer, less haunted. That's because, hey, I'm not who I have to be. I'm just who I want to be. And who's that? Yours. The word hung in the air, simple and profound. She kissed him, tasting salt and sun and something that felt like hope. The nights were magic. They would put Lila to bed, then sit on the terrace with wine and stars and the sound of the sea. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, the futures they wanted to build. Dante told her stories about his sister, about the boy he'd been before the world hardened him. And Amara told him about her fears, her regrets, the moments she thought she wouldn't survive. Do you ever wish you could just stay here forever? She asked one night. Every second. But we can't. No. Eventually, we have to go back. The world doesn't stop spinning just because we step away. I know, but sometimes I wish it would. He pulled her close. Then let's make the most of the time we have. And they did. Made love under the stars, slow and tender, like they had all the time in the world. Made promises whispered in the dark. Made memories that would carry them through whatever came next. One morning, Amara woke early and found Dante already on the beach, standing at the water's edge, staring out at the horizon. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. What are you thinking about? That I don't want this to end. It doesn't have to. Not really. We can take this feeling back with us. Can we? He turned to her, and she saw the doubt in his eyes. Or does the moment we step back into that world, we become who we were before? We become who we choose to be, she said firmly. The world will demand things from you, Dante. It always will. But you get to decide how much of yourself you give it. You get to decide where your priorities lie. And if I can't balance both, if trying to hold on to this means losing everything else, then you choose what matters most. She squeezed his hand, and I think you already know what that is. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. I usually am. A smile tugged at his lips. Modest too. She laughed, and the sound carried on the wind, bright and free. Their last night at the villa was bittersweet. They had dinner on the terrace, simple food, good wine, Lila chattering about all her favorite moments from their trip. When the little girl finally fell asleep, Dante and Amara sat together, neither wanting the night to end. I don't want to go back, Amara admitted. Neither do I. But we will. Yes. And it'll be hard again. Probably. She turned to him. Promise me something. Promise me we won't lose this. Whatever happens, whatever pressures come, we'll hold on to what we've found here. He took her face in his hands, his gaze fierce and tender. I promise, no matter what, we remember this, who we are when everything else falls away. Just us. Just us. They kissed, and it felt like sealing a vow. The flight back fell too short. Lila slept most of the way, exhausted from sun and adventure. Amara watched the clouds pass beneath them, feeling the weight of reality settling back onto her shoulders. Dante was quiet, his hand clasped in hers, his thoughts clearly already turning to what waited for them. When they landed, Marco was there to meet them. He looked relieved to see them, but also tense. Everything okay? Dante asked. Mostly. There are some things that need your attention, but nothing critical. Can it wait until tomorrow? Marco blinked, surprised. Yes, Of course. Good. Dante turned to Amara and Lila. Let's go home. And as they drove back to the compound, Amara felt something shift. This wasn't just a return to their old life. It was a return with new understanding, new priorities. They had tasted freedom, and they weren't going to let it go without a fight. Reality hit fast. Within days of returning, Dante was pulled back into the demands of his world. Meetings that ran late into the night. Problems that required his personal attention. The delicate balance of power that could never be left untended for long. But something was different. He came home. Every night, no matter how late. He made time for breakfast with Lila, even if it meant getting less sleep. He checked in with Amara throughout the day, sending her messages that were brief but present. He was trying, and Amara saw it, felt it, appreciated it more than she could express. But she also saw the strain, the way his jaw would tighten when his phone rang, the way exhaustion lined his face, the way he was trying to be everything to everyone and slowly fracturing under the weight. It came to a head on a Thursday evening. Dante had promised to be home for dinner, a rare event now that they were back. Amara had cooked Lila's favorite meal, and the little girl had spent an hour setting the table with the kind of meticulous care only a 6-year-old could manage. But dinner time came and went. 6 o'clock. 7. 8. Lila's face fell with each passing hour, and Amara's frustration built, hot and sharp. Finally, at 9:30, Dante walked through the door. Lila had already gone to bed, disappointed. Amara was in the kitchen, cleaning up the untouched food. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "You promised." "I know. Something came up. Something always comes up." She turned to face him, anger and hurt warring in her chest. "You promised her, Dante." She waited for hours. Guilt flashed across his face. "I'll make it up to her." "That's not the point. The point is you made a promise and you broke it. Again." "I had no choice. There was a situation that required." "There's always a situation." Her voice rose, all the frustration of the past weeks spilling out. "And I understand that. I do. But you can't keep telling us we matter and then proving we don't. That's not fair. Isn't it? We had something beautiful at that villa, Dante. We had you. Not the boss. Not the enforcer. Just you. And the moment we came back, you disappeared into this life again like we were just a pleasant distraction. You know that's not true." "Do I? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you choosing this over us." The words hung between them, harsh and undeniable. Dante's face went hard. "Everything I do is to protect you, to keep you safe, to make sure you and Lila have the life you deserve. We don't need that life if we don't have you in it." "You don't understand." "Then help me understand. Tell me why the empire matters more than the family. Because right now, I can't see it." He stared at her, something breaking behind his eyes. "Because if I lose the empire, I lose everything, including the power to protect you. And if you lose us while protecting the empire, what then?" He had no answer. Amara felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I'm not asking you to give up who you are, Dante. I'm just asking you to remember who you promised to be. For us." She left him standing in the kitchen, her heart aching, and went to check on Lila. She found the little girl awake, curled under her covers, tears on her cheeks. "Baby, what's wrong? Did Dante forget about me?" The question shattered something in Amara's chest. "No, sweetheart. He didn't forget. He just got stuck at work." "But he promised." "I know. Does he not want to be here anymore?" Amara gathered her daughter close, holding her tight. "He wants to be here. So much. He's just figuring out how to do everything at once. But he loves you. Never doubt that." "You promise." "I promise." But even as she said it, Amara felt the weight of her own doubts pressing down. Dante didn't come to bed that night. Amara found him in the library at dawn, sitting in the dark, an untouched glass of whiskey on the table beside him. She stood in the doorway, unsure whether to enter or leave him to his thoughts. "I'm a terrible father," he said without looking at her. "You're not." "I made her cry." "You disappointed her. There's a difference." He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. "I don't know how to do this, Amara. I don't know how to be what you both need and still hold everything else together." She crossed the room, sitting beside him. "You can't do it alone. That's the lesson, Dante. You've spent your whole life believing you had to carry everything by yourself. But you don't anymore. You have me. You have people you trust. You can delegate. You can let go of things that don't matter as much. And if letting go means people get hurt, then we deal with it, together. But you can't keep sacrificing yourself and expecting that to be enough, because eventually there won't be anything left of you to give." He was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That I can't be both. The man you need and the man this world demands. That trying to be both means I'll fail at everything." Amara took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Then let's redefine success. Let's decide that success isn't about controlling everything or being perfect. It's about showing up, trying, being present even when it's hard. And when I fail, then we'll forgive each other and try again. That's what family does." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Stop saying that. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to have a life beyond this." "I don't know if I know how." "Then learn. With us." The next morning, Dante woke Lila gently, his face soft with contrition. "I'm sorry, little one. I broke my promise." Lila looked at him with the kind of serious expression only children can manage. "Are you going to do it again?" "I'm going to try very hard not to. But if I do, I want you to tell me." "Okay. Tell me when I'm messing up, because sometimes grown-ups need reminders." "Okay. And today, you and I are going to do whatever you want. The whole day. Just us." Lila's face lit up. "Really? Really?" She launched herself at him, and he caught her, holding her close, his eyes meeting Amara's over the little girl's head. "Thank you," he mouthed. Amara nodded, her heart full. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a solution to everything. But it was a start. Weeks passed. Dante restructured things, delegating more, pulling back from the day-to-day operations that didn't require his direct involvement. It wasn't easy. There was pushback from some of his men, confusion about priorities, moments when he questioned whether he was making the right choice. But he kept showing up. For breakfast. For bedtime. For the small moments that mattered more than empires. And slowly, Amara watched him transform. Not into someone different, but into someone more whole. The warrior and the father and the husband existing side by side, imperfect but present. One evening, as they sat together after Lila was asleep, Dante turned to her with a small smile. "I think I'm getting the hang of this. This? Being human." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "You've always been human, Dante. You're just finally letting yourself admit it." He pulled her into his lap, and she curled against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," he said. "I love you too. Even when I mess up. Especially then." They sat in comfortable silence, and Amara felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of challenges, but the presence of hope. They were going to be okay. Not perfect. Not easy. But okay. And that was enough. Time moved differently now. Not in the blurred, desperate way it had when Amara first arrived at the compound, but with a steady rhythm that felt almost ordinary. Months became years. Lila grew, her childhood unfolding in the gardens and halls of a place that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. She was 8 now, bright and curious, with Dante's determination and Amora's compassion woven into every part of her. She knew her father was important, that he did things that required guards and locked doors and hushed conversations. But to her, he was just Dad, the man who helped with homework and taught her to play piano and made terrible jokes that somehow always made her laugh. Amora had found her own place in this world. She ran the legitimate side of Dante's enterprises now, managing investments and charitable foundations with a skill that surprised even her. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was meaningful. She was making a difference, using resources that came from darkness to create light. And Dante had learned a balance. Not perfectly. There were still late nights and emergencies that pulled him away. But he had learned to prioritize, to delegate, to trust others to handle things that once only he could manage. He had learned that being present mattered more than being perfect. They had built something real. One evening, Amora found herself alone in the library, the room that had witnessed so many pivotal moments in their life together. She had poured a glass of wine and was simply sitting, letting her mind wander through memories. She thought about the woman she had been, sitting in that cafe with 17 missed calls and no hope. She thought about the terror of that first night, becoming a stranger's wife, stepping into a world she didn't understand. She thought about all the moments between then and now, the fear and anger and confusion, the slow thawing of distrust, the realization that the man who had taken her freedom had also given her something she never knew she needed. Safety, yes, but more than that, a place to belong. You look thoughtful. She turned to find Dante in the doorway, still in his dress shirt but with his tie loosened, looking tired but content. Just remembering. He crossed the room, pouring himself a drink and sitting beside her. Good memories or bad? Both. All of it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you ever wish things had been different? That we'd met some other way?" Amora considered the question. Really considered it. Sometimes, when I think about how scared I was, how little choice I had. She looked at him, but then I think about what we've built, about Lila, about who we've become together, and I don't know if we could have found this any other way. That doesn't make how it started right. No, it doesn't, but it makes what we've done with it meaningful. He reached for her hand. I know I can never undo the beginning. The way I took your choice from you. The fear I caused. You've spent every day since trying to make up for it. It'll never be enough. Maybe not, but it's real, and it's enough for me. They sat in silence, holding hands, two people who had found each other in the darkest way possible and somehow made light from it. The years continued their march. Lila turned 10, then 12. She started asking harder questions about Dante's work, about the gods and the secrets and the way people sometimes looked at her father with fear. They answered her honestly, age-appropriately, never hiding the truth but also never glorifying it. She struggled with it sometimes, the knowledge of what her father was, what he'd done. But she also saw the man who showed up for her school plays, who helped her through heartbreaks and celebrated her victories, who loved her mother with a devotion that made her believe in love. One day, when she was 13, she asked Dante the question they'd been waiting for. "Dad, are you a good person?" He had looked at her for a long moment, then said, "I've done bad things, Lila. Things I can't undo and will carry with me forever. But I've also tried to be good where it matters most. To you, to your mother, to the people who depend on me. I don't know if that makes me good, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do, isn't it? Try to be better." Yes. She had hugged him then, and over her head, his eyes had met Amora's, filled with gratitude and relief. Their daughter understood, and more importantly, she still loved him. Amora and Dante grew older together. Not old, but older. Lines appeared at the corners of their eyes, gray threaded through hair. The passion between them didn't fade, but it deepened, became something rooted and steady. They had built a life, imperfect and complicated, but theirs. And sometimes, late at night when the compound was quiet, they would find themselves back in the library, their place, talking about everything and nothing. "Do you remember the first time we were in this room together?" Amora asked one night. "You couldn't sleep. You found me drinking in the dark. I was so angry at you. You had every right to be. I thought I would hate you forever. What changed?" She thought about it. "You let me see you. Not the mask you showed the world, but the real you, broken and trying and scared beneath all the control. And that was enough. It was a start." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong, the rhythm that had anchored her through years of uncertainty. "I never thought I could have this," he admitted. "A family, love, something worth living for beyond power and control. And now I can't imagine my life without it. Without you. You'll never have to." They stayed there until dawn, two people who had started in darkness and found their way to light, holding on to each other and the impossible, beautiful thing they'd built. One afternoon, many years after that first night in the cafe, Amara found herself standing at the window of the library, looking out at the gardens where Lila, now a young woman, sat reading under a tree. Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come. About that terrified woman sitting in a cafe who thought her life was over. And I wish I could go back and tell her it wasn't ending. It was just beginning." He turned her to face him, and she saw the lines around his eyes, the silver in his hair, the face she knew better than her own now. "Would you go back and change it if you could?" It was a question he had asked before, in different ways, over the years, and her answer had evolved, deepened, become more certain with time. "No," she said firmly, "because changing the beginning would change everything that came after. And I wouldn't trade this, us, Lila, the life we've built, for anything, not even for the easier path." Something in his expression softened, a lingering guilt finally releasing. "I spent so many years afraid you'd wake up one day and realize you could have had better." "Better?" She cupped his face. "There is no better. There's just ours. And it's everything." He kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that held decades of love and struggle and choice. When they pulled apart, Amara rested her forehead against his. "We did it, you know." "Did what?" "Made something beautiful out of something impossible." "We did." He smiled, and it reached his eyes, those eyes that had once been so cold and were now warm with a contentment he'd never thought possible. "And we're still doing it. Every day." That evening, the three of them had dinner together on the terrace, the city lights spreading below like fallen stars. Lila talked about her plans. She wanted to be a lawyer, to help people the way her mother had once needed help. Dante listened with pride, and Amara felt her heart swell with a joy that still surprised her after all these years. This was her family, born from fear and control, transformed by choice and love into something real and lasting. Later, after Lila had gone to her room, Amara and Dante remained on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air, watching the world turn below them. "Do you ever think about that night?" Amora asked. "The one where you walked into the cafe and changed everything." "Every day." "What do you think about?" "About how close I came to walking past. About how many choices had to align perfectly for us to find each other." He pulled her closer. "About how grateful I am that they did. Even knowing how hard it would be. Especially knowing that, because the hard parts made the good parts matter more." She understood what he meant. The struggles hadn't diminished their love. They had deepened it, proven it, made it something that could weather anything. "I love you," she said. Not because the moment demanded it, but because the truth of it filled her chest and needed to be spoken. I love you too, more than I have words for. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had learned each other's rhythms and silences, who could communicate in glances and touches, who had built a language all their own. And as the night deepened around them, Amora thought about the story she would tell if anyone ever asked. Not the sanitized version, not the one that pretended it was simple or easy, but the true one, about a woman who lost everything and gained the world, about a man who thought he was beyond redemption and found it in the most unexpected place, about a love that should never have worked but did anyway, because they chose it every single day. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. Years continued to pass, as they always do. Lila graduated, went to university, built a life that was hers while still staying connected to the family that had shaped her. She understood the complexity of her origins now, the darkness and light woven together, and had made peace with it. Amora and Dante grew older still. Dante eventually stepped back from the most dangerous aspects of his work, though he never fully left it. Some things, once part of you, never completely release their hold. But he found ways to use his power for good more often than harm, to be a force for protection rather than destruction. And Amora became the heart of their world, not because she was soft or weak, but because she was strong enough to hold space for both truth and grace. She ran charitable organizations that helped women and children in desperate situations, offering them the kind of support she once needed. She turned her own pain into purpose. They were not perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with the weight of their choices and their past. But they always came back together, always chose each other again, because that's what love was, in the end. Not a single moment of decision, but thousands of small choices made over and over, day after day, year after year. Choose to stay, choose to forgive, choose to try again, choose to believe in the possibility of something better, choose love, even when, especially when, it was hard. One night, very late, when they were both somewhere in their 60s and the compound was quiet around them, Amara found Dante in the library. Always the library, their place. He looked up as she entered, and his face creased into a smile that still, after all these years, made her heart skip. Couldn't sleep. Old habits, she said, sitting beside him. He took her hand, and she saw the way time had marked them both. The age spots, the wrinkles, the physical proof of a life fully lived. Do you have any regrets? She asked. He considered the question seriously, as he always did. Regrets about things I've done? Many. But regrets about us? About the life we built together? He shook his head. Never. Not one. Not even the beginning. Especially not the beginning. Because without it, we wouldn't have had everything that came after. And what came after was the best thing that ever happened to me. She leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. Me too. They sat together as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. And Amara thought about the circle of their lives, how it had started in darkness and fear, passed through struggle and choice, and arrived here, at peace. Not because the darkness hadn't been real, but because they had faced it together and found light on the other side. And in the end, that was the story worth telling. Not about the man who took her freedom, or the woman who was trapped, or the cage that held them both. But about two people who found each other in the wreckage of their lives and built something worth keeping. About how love, in its truest form, was not about perfection or ease or fairy tale endings. It was about showing up, even when it was hard. About choosing each other, again and again, until those choices became the foundation of something unbreakable. About how the worst moment of your life could also be the beginning of the best one. If you let it, if you were brave enough, if you chose to believe in the possibility of transformation. Amora had been that brave. Dante had been that brave. And together, they had created something that would outlast them both. A love story for the ages, not in spite of how it began, but because of everything they made of it afterward. The sun rose fully, filling the library with golden light. And in that light, two people sat together, holding hands, their lives intertwined so completely that neither could imagine existence without the other. They had started as captor and captive. They had become husband and wife. But more than that, more than any label could capture, they had become home. For each other, for their daughter, for everyone their love touched. And that, Amara thought as she watched the new day dawn, was the greatest gift of all. Not the safety or the comfort or the material things, but the knowledge that she was loved. Completely, imperfectly, eternally, and that she loved in return. That was worth everything. That was worth the fear and the pain and the impossible choices. Because in the end, love wasn't about the beginning or even the ending. It was about everything in between. All the small moments that built a life. All the choices that proved the love was real. All the times they could have walked away but chose to stay instead. And as the morning light filled their sacred space, Amara squeezed Dante's hand and smiled. Because she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would choose him again. Every single time. Forever. If stories like this linger in your heart long after they end, don't leave just yet. Like, comment, subscribe, and check the description box below, and let the next story find you when the night grows quiet again.